Welcome back, Phosphor Dot fans. I have exciting news. I'm pretty sure you could tell, not only was I really tired last time I recorded a show, I was really bummed because I thought I had lost my game save, which we have been calling Space Station Maria Cat, for the Apple II version of Project Space Station, and in the middle of recording my last show, as tired as I was, it suddenly hit me, I actually have two versions of the Apple II emulator on my computer. Could the game be loaded successfully from the older build of the emulator? And it turns out, as you can see here, we're back in business. So, let's get back out there and see what's going on Space Station Maria Cat. Now, as I mentioned before, there was a significant difficulty recording what would have been the third hour of Project Space Station on the Apple II, and I wound up with only 9 seconds of game footage, but an hour and a half of me talking, which is only good if you like listening to me talking. So, as you can see, we're back on the space station. Oh, there to stand still until I bring up a research pack. Okay, crop inventory is going nicely. Planetary study is going nicely. So crop inventory, as you can see, has actually brought in 33 million in revenue, so it has paid back its own expenses. Pharmaceuticals, yeah, as you can see, the jet engine study during the missing hour and a half of gameplay, that generated a significant breakthrough. Each of the R&D tasks in Project Space Station, oh, there's a launch schedule for today. Really? I didn't know that. Thunderstorms. Let's put it on hold. Okay. Maybe we can launch this way. I don't think they'd actually launch a real space shuttle with 40 to 75 mile per hour winds and a problem in the inertial measurement unit failing to reach the correct pre-flight alignment is about the least of your worries. Severe weather launch reported. Okay. And now, a cat fight. Deploy satellites to low orbit. Bring out your pods. Okay, so we have Felsbaum. He's a chemist who is up there for one of the research projects. But you occasionally have to rotate your R&D team members. And so I have him sitting in reserve to go outside and do this. For those of you just joining us, just in case you were wondering if the space station got any bigger since the last time we were all here, it's gotten a little bit bigger. Now, a big part of that was a glitch in the game that suddenly rolled over the register for the number of satellites that I had bought in the space equipment screen. The number of orbital satellites was 97. I hadn't actually bought 97 satellites. And so that was a bit on the odd side. Ooh. And as you can see, the halcyon days of having enough money for everything are over. Okay, this next flight is all about Taking up research packs. Let's see if we can scoot this flight ahead just a little bit. Now, as you can see there, Ko, the computer expert, is on EVA status. He's not actually on EVA status. There's Pendle, one of the biologists, died in a tragic accident involving me overestimating how much space I had on the station for a single emergency module. Also, Flight Engineer Simpson suffered the same fate literally moments later. It was kind of a 1-2 punch of really bad news. Not my best day of playing this. I've been playing this game for a very long time, and it's been a long time since I, accidentally did something that resulted in crew loss. Something that basically killed somebody. And that really bummed me out, because one of the things I love about Project Space Station, love about this kind of game, and there's not enough of this kind of game to go around for my taste. The game is utterly non-violent. There are no lasers to fire, there are no missiles to dodge, there are no shields to raise. You just have to keep everyone alive and safe, funded and equipped, and keep them up there doing science. That's my kind of game, frankly. But perhaps it's only my kind of game. So, let's see. The entire crew survived the solar flare. Each emergency module, which are in the Apple II version, are the red modules that you see there. I have 3 of them. Each one of those will hold 8 people. I have 5 crew modules, so I potentially have 20 people up there. So it was a bit of bad math on my part. I was not keeping up with how many people I had on the station versus how much safe space I had for them up there. Maria Cat, the official mascot of Space Station Maria Cat, is here with me now, taking a nap. She wore herself out sleeping all night, so now she requires a nap. Me, I just have to get some space under me. I'm so happy to have salvaged my game save. No idea. Now I realize this version of the emulator renders the graphics differently. I actually kind of like the sharper look. Then again, I'm a screenshot kind of guy. I want a nice, crisp screenshot that doesn't look like it was taken off a TV, and I'm not entirely sure why the authors of Apple Win decided that they had to make it look like it was on a screen. I know it's on a screen. Are we really so nostalgic for scan lines and raster bleed that we're going to make that a mandatory setting in emulation now? Okay. Again, we're doing the shuttle missions as grocery runs. There's no reason to keep anyone up there any longer than they have to be, especially given the operational costs of doing so. Yeah, kind of in a hurry to get down. Sorry. The good thing is this is the Apple II version, not the Commodore 64 version, so I don't think it'll penalize me that much. We'll see. Maybe the lack of the lucky Packers mug was not my problem. 7 days. Okay, there should be a satellite somewhere that was dropped off by the shuttle. I don't know where it is. Alright, so sorry for the edit there. Boink! There's the satellite. As I mentioned, this is a rare daytime recording, or at least an attempt to do one. Oh, so it was right over there and I didn't have to go all the way around the planet. Oops. And so there may be a few edits and breaks in here that are uncharacteristic. Oh, it's Maria Cat herself. Are you coming to check on your space station? I think the cat fight earlier was a bit of competition between the proponents of Space Station Maria Cat and Space Station Livy Cat. Alright, satellite to low orbit. Well, that's, as they say in aeronautic circles, get her done. I think this version of the emulator might actually be a little bit faster on the hardware end. So at this point, that reminds me, they're waiting for research packs, aren't they? Yes. Eat them all. Waiting assignment of research equipment. Since we're in the R&D phase of the game, as opposed to the R&B phase of the game where we're just playing non-stop Barry White and launching space shuttles every week, your launches can now be spaced out, no pun intended, quite a bit more realistically. The default in the mission planning screen, according to the game's creator, they are expecting you to have to launch new material or new personnel, new equipment every month, which may not be a bad idea, but if things are going swimmingly on the station, really, do you have to? So this is a good time to while away the time. Boy, all the research packs that I just brought up. Key scientist is needed. That's probably the guy I have out in the pod. Oops. Okay, crop inventory. This is kind of funny because it says not enough of the right scientists are on the project. Oh, crap. Sorry, dude. I need you for a research project, so, like, don't die. Alright. Alright, pharmaceuticals. R&D2. Let's see if swapping out the chemists will do the trick. Not enough for the right scientists on the crop inventory project, and yet it has... The funny thing is, the game provides you, a list of who's needed. And for the crop inventory, literally the only characters you can assign to it, they are all on it right now, and yet not enough of the right scientists. Same on the planetary study, although I have a feeling that our problem there is one of the fact that that one computer expert that is a specialty that is needed for that project deploy satellite to geosynchronous orbit. Be right back with you, science people. Since that one computer specialist who is needed on that project is now the Flying Dutchman, the planetary science project is screwed. The moment you lose a character in this game, you are really doing a number on your ability to get things done in the future. So let's see what other astronomical projects there are that we could be assigning our available personnel to. Astronomer, physicist, computer specialist, meteorologist. Let's do it. Astronomer. Physicist, do I have? Oh, I'm going to have to borrow a physicist from R&D1. And a meteorologist. Do I have a meteorologist on the station? Oh, I don't even have a meteorologist on the payroll. Biannual funds. Oh. Yeah, let's see how much money they feel like giving me now that I've lost crew members. Not enough of the right scientist on this project. Okay. Yeah. I feel you. You see, this one might also require the services of that computer specialist, and that's annoying. Wow. Okay, that's an impressive amount of cash, given that my rate of success has been questionable. Deploy satellite to low orbit. Alright, so I'm about to have PAMs out here with no satellites sitting on them. I think it's given our little budget boost it's time to plan the next shuttle flight to correct that deficiency and also get that meteorologist up here for that research project. Alright, so we have that meteorologist, and we have this meteorologist. We'll just bring them both up. What the heck? Why not? As you can see, I really only have one satellite. I have a crew module? I have a crew module. That's right, I have 3 emergency modules, each of which can handle 2 crew modules worth of folks. And yes, I just said folks. Well, let's go ahead and bring up... Wow. I don't think I've ever played this game into 1988 in game time. That's wild. Let me see, when is this due to be launched? Wow, it's a couple of weeks out. Let's go check our R&D. One of the material research packs needs to be replaced. Oh, you guys are killing me. Scientists and their demands. Okay, I think obviously we need to bring the schedule forward. Alright, so launch day yet again. On the previous installment where I was playing Commodore 64 Project Space Station, because, you know, I had set aside time to do a show, and by God, I was going to do a show, even if it wasn't the one I was expecting. That's right, Obi. And away we go. I was talking about things that could be done to update this game, although you would kind of be in an alternate reality if you wanted to make it a multiplayer game with another player potentially playing the part of the Soviet Union, launching Buran shuttles to build the Mir space station, or build onto the Mir space station, as it were. Let's get our meteorologists transferred. And let's land the bird. Another multiplayer option, in addition to playing an alternate version of the Soviet Union, which is not at the end stage of the lifespan of its system of government and successfully launching space shuttles to its own space station. Another possibility would be to do an alternate universe private space industry, which really didn't exist in 1984 or 85. There was no reason to include anything like it in the game. You know, as you've already seen, if you fail to launch a satellite on schedule, the European Space Agency will take it off your hands. But a a multiplayer update of this game could take something like SpaceX into account, and Oberon. You would definitely have to take Obi into account, wouldn't it, Obi? But maybe SpaceX isn't even the right entity to emulate in the game, because it's just possible that what do you think of my space station there, Obi? Pretty good, huh? Tell you what, when we play the PC version, we'll do Outpost Oberon. How about that? Yeah, go have a seat. There are companies here and now like Bigelow Aerospace. Yeah, very good. Every once in a while, the Arkansas just spews out of me. Bigelow Aerospace has floated the idea numerous times of a private industry-based space station built around its inflatable station modules, one of which is currently attached to the International Space Station, the BEAM, or the Bigelow Experimental Activity Module. Bigelow is their business model and their equipment paradigm is built around the idea that you don't have to have rigid metal canisters. You can have basically inflatable modules, which, you know, kind of brings to mind the idea that there are, you know, they're just putting bouncy castles up in space. Now that is kind of, oh, oh, my pod is disabled. Okay, let's go to construction pod conga line real quick and get this out of the way. If you had a fictional competitor along the lines of Bigelow Aerospace who could challenge you for, you know, how fast a satellite could be put in orbit, and could have its own space station, perhaps cheaper than the modules having to be paid for by whoever's basically playing as NASA, but also those modules could have different levels of vulnerability, for lack of a better explanation, than the tin cans. So look at that. That is a big space station. Now let's get our deploy satellite to low orbit. Never a moment's peace. Obi, are you knocking things over? And if so, why? The answer is yes, because I'm a cat. So, another successful satellite deployment. But a fictional entity operating on the same sort of equipment paradigm as Bigelow Aerospace could liven things up for a multiplayer game. Okay. Let's get our meteorologists on this. We'll see if that is the golden combination. combination. Key scientist is needed for this project. Yeah, this is where R&D projects really get frustrating, because oh, I didn't mean to do that. What am I even doing here? You are shuffling personnel. And this is why I just send everyone up to the station. Yes, I am wearing a shirt with a kitten hanging onto a space shuttle. Because why not? The shuffling of personnel to make an R&D project work is frustrating. It's not a lot of fun. But this is the stage of the game you're trying to get to where you're not having to launch space shuttles every 10 minutes. He said while he was at the launch pad. It's kind of funny that enough shuttles have now been launched in the game that we have come out of the STS number letter combination thing that was prevalent from 1984 through 86. After STS 9, they switched to a system that, you know, did not follow these very simple numbering of the early space transportation system launches, because they were trying to do, there was a code to it, and I will explain it to you in a minute when I'm not actually flying a ship. And, you know, there is a rhyme and reason to the code, but still, it's one of those things that is kind of like, okay, why? And I think part of it is that missions were getting shuffled around and delayed and not going up in the, you know, not going up in the simple numerical order, which is a problem that persisted after the return to a more simple numbering system for the missions, but it was no longer an issue. Now, as legend would have it, and I don't know if this is a true story or if this falls under the heading of urban legend, the story goes that okay, good. The solar physics project is going well, and we have to deploy a satellite to geosynchronous orbit. And I have an Obi cat who's about to fall out of orbit because he's trying to climb up on the shelves. I like it when the entire crew survives. You have no idea how bummed out I was that I lost crew members. Like I said, that really throws the rest of your game out of balance, because all of a sudden there are R&D projects that you cannot successfully complete. Let's go in and buy some gear. I think I pointed out really early in the early in doing these videos that you will need far more
Sorry, Dad, but seems like my butt ran out of poop.
Okay, go wipe your butt. Go flush the toilet. Go put your underwear back on. I've told you this. I don't want you running around and running in front of windows naked.
There's no poop on my butt.
Okay, good. Go get your underwear back on. It's even simpler then. Just bring a pair of glasses. Yes, I did. Damn it. Shit. Sorry again for the interrupt. We are enduring the horrors of the end stages of potty training. Here at the greenhouse, and so it's challenging to get anything done like recording YouTube videos in the daytime, which is why they're always done at night, you'll notice. Okay, so in game time, it's August 28th of 87. It's going to be nearly 2 weeks before we launch the next shuttle. Not enough of the right scientists, and yet exactly the right scientists are on the project, and it will come back to that again. Oh, look at that. The solar physics experiment has already brought in revenue. That's nifty. Well, you'd think pharmaceuticals would be a big one, but here we are. Hey, I like it when all the research is progressing nicely. That makes me happy. I can send some poor unwanted biologist who is not currently needed out to throw away some wads of space toilet paper. Okay, so about the codes. The launch codes that were used in place of mission numbers, you would wind up with stuff like STS-61A instead of them calling it, STS-15 or something. Like I said, there's a story that's going around, and it's even on Wikipedia, so I am not sure how much weight to give it, how much credence to lend it. But the story goes that the NASA administrator at the time decided that one way to make sure that there was never another Apollo 13 was to change the numbering of the launches in the shuttle program so that there was never an STS-13. Yeah. So that's a very well-reasoned and well-thought-out approach to government operations. Anyway, the launches in the mid-1980s, prior to Challenger, after which they went back to the return to flight after Challenger was STS-26, because even NASA was tired of the acronym soup and the weird code. And the weird code went like this: you had STS, and then you had a number like 5161. The federal fiscal year was the first digit of that number. So, STS 41 something, that was something that was on the budget since the fiscal year of 1984. Now, it may not have launched in 1984, but there you go. The second digit indicated where the shuttle was launching from, which seems kind of silly now because every space shuttle mission launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. However, never forget that the Air Force had significant input into the shuttle's cargo capability, the size and weight of cargo that it could carry, and even its cross-range ability as far as where it could land. The Air Force had its fingers in that pie the whole time. And there were quite advanced plans, and even a facility not really so much built as retrofitted at Vandenberg Air Force Base in Southern California to launch shuttles into polar orbit. Why polar orbit? Because polar orbit is how you launch stuff if it's a satellite with military applications, which basically means spy satellites. You could not launch a shuttle from Kennedy into polar orbit because that would mean that instead of going downrange out across the Atlantic, it would be going up the entire eastern seaboard, and any incident that would cause a vehicle to shed debris, which you have to keep in mind, dropping the SRBs, dropping the external tank, the shuttle is shedding debris more or less all the way up. So you are going to potentially risk the entire population of the eastern seaboard as to where the SRBs were going to go down. No. Sending them up from California, that's a whole different thing because it's California, apparently. Never really worked that out myself. But I think you could get from Vandenberg to polar orbit, arching away from the population centers and going over the Pacific, easier than you could avoid the population centers being underneath the shuttle's flight path for the entirety of a launch. On the East Coast. Oh, we went from a key scientist being needed to research progressing nicely. You know what? I suspect some serious randomness going on here. I really do. That is some serious running out of money that we're doing there. No likey. Me no gusta. I actually have more PAMs in reserve than I have satellites. You know what? Maybe something needs to be done. I think maybe it's time to sell some stuff back. Call me a little bit paranoid, but I want to go ahead and put this launch on the books before the end of '87. While Crowded Houses Don't Dream It's Over is still on the charts, because I have a feeling the operations budget may dwindle precipitously low. The funny thing is that really doesn't seem to affect what's going on the station. You notice this game does not task you with sending the equivalent of a Russian Progress vehicle into orbit at any point. Man, it's a good thing I went shopping and brought this stuff up there to you guys. What do you scientists do with this stuff? Alright, so we've got about a month before the next shuttle launch. Let's go kill some space debris. Why not? Okay, so back to the weirdly coded launches. If the second digit in one of these mid-80s launch numbers mission numbers was a 2, that was an indication that that shuttle was going to be launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Now, I'm sure you're thinking that, well, yeah, that's all fine and great in theory, but that never actually happened. No, there was, before the schedule got scrapped in the wake of the Challenger disaster, there was an STS-62A on the books and on the flight manifest. So, A indicated the order in which it was intended to launch, maybe not the order in which it did or would launch, but that was where it was on the priority. So STS-62A would have been the first flight budgeted for the fiscal year of 1986 to launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base. And it was actually on the books for July 1986. Crew was assigned, and the cargo was naturally a classified Defense Department payload, a satellite. You know, almost certainly a spy satellite, and almost certainly looking down on the fine folks in the Soviet Union at the time. And there was a second flight, early in the preliminary stages of being planned, an STS-62B for September of '86. So your second Vandenberg launch for the fiscal year of 1986. However, that was very much preliminary at the time the Challenger exploded, and the resulting investigation and top-to-tail rethink of processes and procedures within NASA threw the flight manifest into disarray, to say the least. But oh, I forgot I had, oh, that's right, I just had a shuttle do a milk run, and I totally did not come and get any of it. And I can't get any of it until I get the space trash out of the way. Space trash! So, the plans for launches from Vandenberg were far enough along that NASA flew the Enterprise out there to erect on the pad with an external tank and a pair of solid rocket boosters to make sure everything fit where it was supposed to. It's a good thing to find that out before you're trying to launch. This is getting dangerous. Ow. We're running low on fuel too. describing the satellite. Let's take it over to our wonderful launch facility over here at the station. Whoa! Oh, got debris on our doorstep. It's like the universe left a flaming bag of dog poo right in front of the space station. This will not stand. I'm going to write a strongly worded letter. But of course, while the Enterprise was on the pad at Vandenberg doing engineering fit checks, it was also a great photo op, and there were some, a lot of really fantastic photos taken of, a shuttle on the pad at this kind of compact launch facility that had been retrofitted from, it was Space Launch Complex 6 at Vandenberg, and that had been built in the 60s. Whoa! How do I even fix that? Maybe this is unwise, but I almost kind of want to leave it there to see what happens. And yet at the same time, I don't want to put a hole in the station. I'm going to have to dismantle some modules to... Can I get it back in... Oh, sweet. Alright. Deploy satellite to geosynchronous orbit. You know what? I am all over it, just like I've got a bunch of asteroids all over me. I'm too far from the satellite, really? Okay, now that I'm colliding with it, and now am I close enough? Good. How much damage did that rack up? Jeez. Okay. I won't leave it there too long. It'll disappear on me. That would be a very expensive mistake to make. I even remember there being a news clip involving the Enterprise being towed to Vandenberg. I'm sure it was brought on the back of the 747 to one of the civilian airports. Okay. Entire crew survived. I wonder how feasible it is to thread this needle. I've never had this happen before, but I've never had a station this large in the game before. Maybe it's doable. Back out of there with that thing. See, if I start peeling these power and radiator modules off the top of the station, that's going to screw with the R&D stuff going on. Sleeping out there for a moment. Not enough of the right scientists, and yet there are. A key scientist is needed. How much you want to bet it's the dead guy, the dead computer specialist? All right. Key scientist is needed. Oh, he's out on EVA. Crap. Scheduled for today. Okay, get pod oxygen very low. I need to stop. I need to stop leaving them out there when I go to check on the R&D. See, that's how the game introduces these project killing challenges, by distracting you enough that you leave a dude out in a pod running out of air. Which, that has happened to me before. So we've been talking about the Enterprise and the other shuttles, and in one of the previous installments of our Project Space Station long play, I actually got off the screen and played one of these little public domain NASA highlight reel films, or at least a little segment of it related to developments in the shuttle program in the year 1973, which, yes, there were developments in the shuttle program in 1973, since it was about a year old at that point. The design and the scope of the shuttle program had been signed off during the Nixon administration. So, let me set my timer here. And what I have here is the portion of the 1977 NASA Space and Aeronautics highlight reel. Except in 77 there was a lot more stuff going on because Enterprise had had her first test flights. So this is about 7 minutes long, and it's kind of interesting. Things were really ramping up, and we'll talk about the timing of that, the fortuitous timing of that. If you, like me, were a suddenly space-fixated kid in the 1970s.
Enterprise Houston. Go ahead, Bevo. We have a couple of updates to your pre-flight cue card, the altitude. Okay, stand by one. Okay, we're ready to copy. Separation is at 23.0. Next one, 18.0. Rolled out on final at 8.3, and then 1.9er. I suggest you go ahead and start your engines and begin your taxi.
called Enterprise, first of the Space Shuttle orbiters, the beginning of a new space transportation system. A craft that can carry up to 65,000 pounds into space and land back on Earth like an airplane. 5 times, 2 astronauts were carried piggyback atop this 747 jet and released. 5 times, they brought the huge spaceship in for powerless landings.
Okay, the gear is coming down at 270. Gear coming. Doors open and they're all down, coming down. Look down here. 50 feet. 40 feet. 30. 20. Okay. 10. Holding 10. 220 about 5 feet.
Summing up the year's work for all 4 of the astronaut crewmen, astronaut Gordon Fullerton.
We're at the end of the approach and landing test phase of this program, but it's really not an end, it's a beginning. It's just a small step really accomplished getting the orbiter into space, and in that aspect I'm looking forward to more of the same exciting times as we continue on toward that first orbital flight.
Enterprise will not be the first shuttle into space, but this one will be. Shown here being assembled by Rockwell International, it is simply designated Orbiter 102.
102 is undergoing construction right now in Palmdale, and it's scheduled to be shipped the middle of next year over to DFRC, where we'll perform a hot fire test on it. We will mate it to the 747 and fly it to Florida in preparation for launch into orbit in March of 1979. After about 24 hours in orbit on 102, it also will land here at DFRC on the lake bed in a manner similar to the test flights that we just completed on the approach and landing test.
Also completed this year, the 154-foot-long, 27.5-foot-wide external fuel tank for the shuttle. Designed and assembled by Martin Marietta at NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility near New Orleans, the external tank will fuel shuttle's 3 main engines on the way to orbit. Another major milestone for the new space transportation system was the successful test firing of one of the 2 Thiokol solid rocket motors that will also help boost the shuttle orbiter into space. This animation shows how they work during launch. The 2 solid rocket boosters strapped to each side carry their own propellants and burn for about 2 minutes before separating. Their onboard parachutes will then bring them back to Earth for recovery and reuse. The large external fuel tank continues feeding the shuttle engines for an additional 6 minutes, separating just before the shuttle reaches orbit. This is the only part of the shuttle system that will not be used again. When NASA announced it was recruiting between 30 and 40 new astronauts, more than 8,000 hopeful candidates responded, including over 1,500 women. The Johnson Space Center in Houston is in the final screening process to select from this group both mission specialists and pilots for future space shuttle flights. To get a feel for handling large structures in space, engineers at the Marshall Space Flight Center have been practicing underwater, the closest you can come for long periods of time to simulating the weightlessness of space. It's anticipated that the shuttle will make the building of large space structures possible, as well as the assembly of heavier satellites and instruments to better observe Earth and provide improved communications. Even solar satellites could be constructed to beam the sun's energy to Earth if it becomes an economic and reasonable alternative to some of our ground-based energy resources. Many of the early shuttle flights are already booked with confirmed payloads, according to NASA's Director of Pricing, Launch Agreements, and Customer Engineering Services, Mike Smith. This payload section of a shuttle under construction gives some idea of the space available.
On Earth. Well, we're sold out on flights through 1980 and have firm flight assignments through 1981. Typical of these flights are the launch of a long-duration exposure facility for NASA on Flight 7 and its retrieval on Flight 17. We have a full manned space lab line on Flight 11 and a Jupiter orbiter probe flying on Flight 26. We have numerous communication satellites being launched for Telesat Canada, ComSat, Satellite Business Systems Corporation, and India in the early 80s and 81 time period.
Manufacture of the first flight unit has begun on Space Lab, shown here in mock-up. Space Lab is unique because it represents a cooperative venture by NASA and the European Space Agency. To be built in self-contained modules, the Space Lab will be placed inside the shuttle payload section. There, from 1 to 4 payload specialists will attend to a variety of experiments while working in a shirt-sleeve environment. Space Lab is expected to make significant contributions to science, medicine, industrial processing, and other fields.
So we're back. We've got a satellite that we need to launch to low orbit. I think I'm going to go over here to the Sargasso Sea of space and put this thing out of its misery rather than haul it back there. The space trash makes this game a nightmare for people with OCD, I have to imagine. The Vandenberg facility had been built in the 1960s at great expense because the Air Force was planning to launch its own space station at that time called the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, or MOL. And it was going to be, military space station was going to have military objectives. That sucker was going into polar orbit, and so the Slick 6 launch facility at Vandenberg was originally constructed for the MOL station, which would have been launched by a Titan II, and the crew rotation would have been taken care of with Gemini capsules rather than Apollo. I imagine that had a lot to do with the fact that Gemini was launched by a Titan II, and the Air Force had plenty of those. I mean, I suppose it's better to launch a spacecraft than a warhead with one, but still, the compatibility with the booster, I imagine, had a lot to do with it. MOL was canceled after billions of dollars had been spent on it, and astronauts had even been trained for it. And so when the MOL program was canceled in the late 60s, the astronauts from the MOL program were absorbed into NASA, although NASA already had its crew roster full as far as Apollo launches went. And so you started seeing the MOL people finally go to space aboard the shuttle. Robert Crippen, the pilot on the very first shuttle mission, was one of the Air Force appointed MOL astronauts. Finally making it into orbit alongside John Young, who was an Apollo veteran, Gemini veteran, and arguably our most experienced astronaut at that point. So as you can see there, things were in full swing in 77. As far as activity in the shuttle program. And here's the thing, I've always kind of suspected, because I remember my mom sitting me down in front of the special report the first time that they dropped the Enterprise off the back of the 747 to see if it would glide to the ground or plummet. Of course, it glided quite gracefully, but I remember watching that live as it happened, and the funny thing was, you know, up until that point, you had been told that spacecraft could be any shape. It did not have to be aerodynamic unless it was going to go through an atmosphere, which obviously the shuttle was. It was going to, you know, return to Earth's atmosphere, or through Earth's atmosphere. So there was a lot of, especially in the wake of Star Wars, you know, there was a lot of, yeah, you know, there's no sound, there's not actually sound in space. There's not actually this, that, or the other. And, you know, fine, ruin our fun. We'll see if that gets the pharmaceutical project going. Not enough of the right scientists, and yet there are. Okay. Wow, solar physics keeps raking in a small but steady stream of money. Yeah, I had a feeling my launch was creeping up on me. Not liking the thunderstorms. Not liking that at all. That's better. Let's go to space and then immediately come back. I wonder how the real shuttle fleet would have handled this rapid fire pace of launch. How stressful it would have been on the vehicles versus having them stay up there for a week or two. Yep, dropped off the payload. Bye! And this is really the last shuttle I intend to launch in 1987. So, Slick 6 had originally been built for MOL in the 60s, and then it was refitted for the shuttle at a cost of $4 billion. And then a shuttle never flew there. All you really got out of the deal was a photo op with the Enterprise on the pad, and that's it. NASA didn't want to deal with the risk, especially after Challenger, which proved that you could have a vehicle, you know, not just shed debris in normal flight, but become debris that would then shower down on everyone's heads for quite a long way. They definitely did not want that going on with the whole western coast. So Vandenberg launches were scrapped, and at the same time that NASA was worrying about its own safety record, the Yeah, we're going to send a medical doctor out to fire a satellite to orbit, because why not? Because we can. Let's go find the payload that just got dropped off. We'll just fire this one off instead of bringing it back. And now we have an orphan Pam. Go figure. Yeah, so much for me keeping my satellites and payload modules in equilibrium. Let's go deal with this debris that's right on top of the station, shall we? The Slick 6 story doesn't end there, though, because a great deal of money was spent to refit it again for Delta IV and Delta IV Heavy boosters. At a later date. And it's still used for that. And it's also been used, it has also since been used, well, I don't know if it's Slick 6 specifically at Vandenberg, but Vandenberg has also hosted SpaceX launches. Often for the same clients for whom the shuttle would have been launching payloads from Vandenberg. So, here's the story of Slick 6 for you. So slick that it slid right off the list of things that we were planning to do, even though it was basically constructed, fully constructed, and then abandoned. Government operation for you, right there. Now, here's the thing, you know, I keep talking about alternate universe scenarios. I have a gut feeling that if the shuttle had proven to be flawlessly reliable and launches had been carried out from Vandenberg, I think the Air Force would have eventually bought its own shuttle. And there was also a shuttle landing strip at Vandenberg, which was never used. So a little bit more house cleaning, and then I think we're going to go back to the barn, check our R&D projects, and call it a day for this one. I wasn't expecting to do 2 Project Space Station long plays within 24 hours of each other, even though I'm not releasing them back to back like that. I was just so happy to have access to my saved game again. I hear the pitter-patter of little feet upstairs. Kind of amazed that he hasn't interrupted recording more than he has. Alright, so while I am once again doing house cleaning in space, let's fast forward the NASA highlight films a couple of years to 1979. The year that the shuttle was supposed to be going into service, but I think everyone realized long before then that that wasn't going to happen.
Just as we entered the region of Jupiter's magnetic field,
We learned more about 2 of our planetary neighbors this year, Jupiter and Saturn. Scientists launched rockets to improve methods of studying ozone in the Earth's upper atmosphere. Parts of the new space transportation system were assembled and rolled out to the launch pad in a major test. And the tilt-rotor research aircraft began making transition flights, one of a number of aeronautics programs underway. This is what NASA's space shuttle will look like prior to launch. Shown here during a test rollout is the shuttle orbiter Enterprise, sitting on top of its large external fuel tank and between two solid rocket boosters. The two solid rockets will be parachuted back to an ocean landing where they'll be picked up and made ready for another mission. Preparations for the first shuttle launch continued this year, including a water deluge test. 300,000 gallons of water will be dumped on the spacecraft's mobile platform at the time of launch to counteract damaging noise vibrations of the engines at liftoff. The 16 seconds of waterfall has a sound deadening effect as the engines fire. The three main engines that will power the Space Shuttle Columbia into orbit were tested at the National Space Technology Laboratory in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. The main engines are designed to produce up to 470,000 pounds of thrust, gulping a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. Problems in testing the shuttle engines continue to cause delays. One of the two solid rocket boosters that will burn for 2 minutes with the shuttle's main engines during launch is shown laid out horizontally in preparation for a test firing. The place is the Thiokol Corporation near Brigham City, Utah. Each of the solid rocket boosters produces 2,650,000 pounds of thrust. Small rocket engines called thrusters that make it possible to maneuver the shuttle once in space were also successfully fired at NASA's White Sands test facility in New Mexico. The 154-foot external propellant tank that will hold 1,550,000 pounds of fuel for the shuttle's three main engines was rolled out and shipped to the Kennedy Space Center, Florida. The external tank was manufactured at NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility by the Martin Marietta Company. This is Space Shuttle Orbiter 102, christened Columbia. It was named for the seagoing Columbia out of Boston that entered and explored the mouth of the Columbia River in 1792. Captain Robert Gray named the river after his ship. It will be the Space Shuttle Columbia that makes the first trip into orbit around the Earth. The 122-foot-long spaceship, which looks like and lands like an airplane, is being molded into existence by a government industry team of engineers and technicians. 31,000 specially made silica tiles are being mounted on the surface of Columbia, making it possible for the shuttle to withstand repeated heating and cooling, good for 100 or more round trips into space without replacement. Problems encountered in installing the protective tiles have contributed to pushing back the first shuttle launch by several months. Astronauts John Young and Bob Crippen will pilot Columbia on its maiden voyage into space. They are ready, and despite some troublesome delays along the way, all the parts and pieces of the new space transportation system are coming together and approaching launch readiness. This special report brought to you by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
As you can see, my OCD has gotten the best of me, and I'm dismantling my station in orbit just to get to the space debris. But perhaps I have, perhaps a reassessment of the design is in order. Maybe this is what that station design screen in the planning area is all about. It's just, I don't want to burn up money in the station design screen. So, here we are. This is still not going to solve all of my problems. Oh, let's just make it 20 football fields long. This behemoth of a space station that I've built up here. Why not? More space debris. Why not? It's kind of interesting that by 1980s, things were actually getting closer to the shuttle taking off. It seemed like NASA had less to say in its highlight films than it did previously. So, now that we know that Space Station Maria Cat is retrievable and playable, I think we'll be playing some more Project Space Station in the not-too-distant future, but for now I think it's a pretty good chunk, hopefully compensates for the lack of it in the previous show. And we'll be back in orbit fairly soon.